Oh my god, guys, I just saw Logan. If you guys want to see a comic book movie that pulls your heartstrings, you need to see Logan. Logan is a fantastic movie. It's just freaking see it. It's great. Anyway, speaking of comic books, we have something quite special for today. It concerns Marvel Comics, something that I'm not a big fan of compared to DC. The question being asked on the title is very blatant. Are SJWs ruining comics? Well, not really. Marvel Comics is ruining Marvel Comics. If SJWs are the ones ruining it, then they wouldn't be boycotting it. No, seriously, they boycotted Marvel Comics. Marvel tried so hard to please them with such gems like Feminist Thor, Unsolicited Opinions on Israel, Feminist Skull Pirates, Evolution is Not a Theory, and good lord so many more that I made tons and tons of videos of, all of which got viral for some reason, and it backfired on them. It's almost like pleasing them is an impossible task or something. This video has a quite interesting like to dislike ratio, and it came from a channel with 1 million subscribers. And guys, if you have some interesting videos that you want me to respond to, feel free to DM me either on Twitter or YouTube, or just post it in a comment on the video title and the channel name. Don't post links though. They would instantly mark it as spam. It might be fun for the next couple of months, but for now, I'm going to have lots of fun. This video is going to be lots of fun.
Comics have been ruined by those pesky meddling SJWs. For those of you who don't know, a social justice warrior is a term jerks like to use on the internet in order to silence conversations about equality.
No, social justice warriors are those that want equality, but did it in the most ham-fisted, insanely idiotic manner, like making certain characters in fiction not white, not straight, or not male, because apparently being all of those three equals evil. And if we're talking about social justice, why go after pop culture? I mean, aren't there any social injustices that are happening outside of pop culture that are more important? I mean, this is very first world problem if you ask me. People get into comic books to get away from these social issues, not confront them. If you define it as a term that jerks use on the internet to silence discussion about equality, well, discussion about equality is a rather interesting euphemistic term about how straight white men are absolute scumbags and they shouldn't be on comic books ever.
You can't Google the words SJW and comics without a whole bunch of articles popping up about how Marvel sales are down because they're being too progressive, or how SJW culture is ruining comic books for its fans.
My big problem with this video is that it has not shown any example of a comic being ruined by SJWs. I've watched the entire video, not one shot from any of the pages from Marvel Comics that are being ruined by SJWs.
You know what I say to that? Whoever wrote these articles don't know dick about comics, because comics have literally always been about social justice.
Well, in that case, define social justice. If you take the word social justice by its literal meaning, then yes, comics are always about social justice. Batman being vigilante to save Gotham from the oppressive mobsters that rule every corner of the city. The Avengers saving the world from evil aliens who want to take over the world. Yes, social justice, if being taken in its literal meaning, has always been in comics. However, social justice that people are talking about here is on a different context entirely, because people have interesting modern definitions of what social justice is. Social justice apparently means hating on Trump. Social justice means there's a patriarchal conspiracy within S.H.I.E.L.D. Social justice means shoving feminist agendas when they're not needed. Now, don't get me wrong, politics can be a core part of the story, like 1984, or in some extent, Shimoneta. But unfortunately, what we have right now is political elements being shoved down to our throat and forced into us. Again, show examples, please.
So now I'm gonna take you cucks through comic book history, so the next time somebody complains about how all of a sudden SJWs have ruined comics, you can well actually them straight back to their shitty little forums on 4chan.
Wow, you just insulted your detractors right there, calling them jerks from the depths of shitty internet forums. Well, I am in this shitty internet forum called YouTube, where apparently 18,500 subscribers are watching my every move. And the people who are complaining about social justice in comic books don't just came out of the shitty little internet forums. There are quite a lot of them in less shittier internet forums. If you're gonna dismiss them simply because they came from the depths of 4chan, well, even if you're right, you still haven't provided examples of why they're wrong.
Let's start at the very beginning, and to do that, we need to go all the way back to the 1930s.
She followed this with a very painful, cringy skit. So to sum up, the 1930s are economically disturbed and we need some form of escapism out of it. And we did that by not reminding us that the 1930s are economically bankrupt. We did that by making fictional stories that people can have a good time with.
But while the lack of a job market and the inability to find a home was a huge problem for most Americans, the 30s were also embroiled in some pretty heavy social injustice. In 1934, two Jewish immigrants by the names of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created a character who represented everything the downtrodden working class of the 1930s dreamed of. Of course, I'm talking about Superman, and he too was an immigrant with a rural upbringing, only he had the infinite power to stop anything that stood in the path of truth, justice, and the American way.
Yeah, but when Superman was first created, the social-political elements weren't as blatant as it was in current comics. It's called allegories, and social or political allegories exist in fiction, including great works like 1984. The entire X-Men series is built on allegories of racism and discrimination. You can make fiction that in some ways correlate to the context of the real world or the time where you're writing, but still be able to stand on its own merit without reminding us about the historical context of the writing too much. Logan doesn't really show much of the humans versus mutants thing. It does show some, but it mostly focuses on another different story, which was obviously Logan and dealing with his old age, his constantly deteriorating state, and of course his relationship with X-23. Again, you didn't show examples of comics in current year being ruined by SJWs like "Nation stops being sexist, starts talking about tampons," or "People who disagree with open border policies are Nazi scumbags." What you're doing here is an intellectually dishonest practice of conflating the two as if they were the same thing. Your argument is politics have been in comics, therefore terrible writing is perfectly okay.
Alan Moore put it best when he said, in his earlier adventures, with an admirably broad-minded definition of what constituted criminality, a splendidly egalitarian Man of Tomorrow would rough up strikebreakers and use his super strength to hurl unscrupulous slum landlords over the horizon.
That's the creator of Watchmen, by the way. What he's saying here is Superman saves the poor by beating up the cronies. That's it. That's not an allegory of the economical state of the 1930s. That's a simple escapist story concept that almost every story can be made of without the necessity of being an allegory of something. This isn't an equal example to what comic books do today. You know, like unsolicited opinions on Israel? Seriously, how long are you going to pursue this non sequitur?
In fact, Superman's first appearance was in a comic called Superman Champion of the Oppressed.
Yes, that's one alternative title for the comic, but the most commonly known title is Action Comics #1. Champions of the Oppressed is indeed another title for the comic, but it's also a term being used inside the comic. Here's the panel for full context. He was talking about people who are in need of help. That can be literally anybody, and it doesn't necessarily have to correlate with the economic situations of the 1930s. That, and it's not only males can be superheroes.
The next huge example of this would be World War II. There are literally story arcs and entire issues dedicated to Batman, Robin, the Human Torch, and Wonder Woman all fighting the Axis powers.
The mob propaganda argument. This argument is very common among my own detractors on arguing about comic books and politics. Yes, some of the famous superheroes today came out of World War II propaganda comics. Some of the superheroes today benefit out of World War II propaganda comics. Yes, comics back then are propaganda comics. Therefore, propagandas in comics today are totally okay. So what you're saying here is you want comic books of current year to be just like World War II propagandas from the 40s and the 50s because comic books has always been about propaganda. I mean, that's not exactly progressive, guys. That's like saying, back then, games used floppy disks, therefore making games in floppy disks now is totally fine. You don't care about good writing, you don't care about good characters. As long as the comic books made the propaganda that you personally agree with, you will defend them vehemently. And I've seen people do this. Well, I don't like Trump as well, but I don't want a comic book to remind me of how I hate him.
Superheroes have always been designed around social and political issues as a way for readers to help navigate their own moral compass during turbulent times.
I think we have a rather different standard of what turbulent time is. One is a time where the Axis powers are actually killing people, and the other one is someone you really don't like becoming president. Turbulent time? Yes. Maybe. For you.
And since the topic of whether it's okay or not to punch a Nazi is especially relevant these days, I'm gonna go ahead and say yes, it's totally okay to punch a Nazi.
Wow, I did not expect you to go there. How about this comic? Can you explain to me this whole punching Nazis thing? Of course, I'm more happy to educate you, my dear basement-dwelling cousin. So someone who has a different opinion to you that you don't like is a Nazi, and Nazis deserve to be punched, right? And I don't like you or your asinine opinion, so by that logic...
DC and Marvel were free to make their characters more flawed in order to confront societal issues. Child abuse was revealed to be the reason behind Hulk's rage, Lex Luthor went from being an evil inventor to a corrupted businessman, and Iron Man was revealed to be an alcoholic. The 80s also introduced the first openly gay and HIV-positive superhero, Extraño. Looking back, it was a pretty offensive character, but his battle with a white supremacist AIDS vampire named Hemogoblin was nevertheless an important—
Okay. We just need to stop for a moment. Look. I don't care about how comics were historically about progressive values. I have no doubts that they are. I care about how they are implemented today. Because how they are implemented today are terrible. This entire video is a complete non sequitur. Comic books were all about social justice. Therefore, the horrendous, cringy Tumblr fanfiction writings of comic books today are perfectly justified. That's literally your argument. You didn't show any examples of comic books being ruined by SJWs because that would just destroy your argument in an instant. I'm going to skip this to a part where you actually provide arguments for current comic books because that's the only thing that's relevant for today, okay? That's relevant. Let's move on.
So let's jump to current comics because a lot of interesting stuff is happening here right now. A lot of fanboys and girls have been pretty pissed off about the newer, more progressive iterations of their favorite classic characters. Thor is a girl now, Iron Man is also a girl, but she's a black teen, McCannon!
Yeah, and their sales once tanked because McCannon. There was that one time in which DC demolishes Marvel and dominates the top 50. To be fair, Marvel managed to regain their momentum, but keep in mind that was at a time where Marvel wants to drop politics out of comics, something that they should do months ago, way before all of this. You can go and be progressive all you like, but it didn't resonate well with the readers.
Point is, there's a lot going on, and in this incredible, terrible, wonderful, horrifying current world, conversations about social justice can take place easier than ever.
Oh really? Can I put a pin of Pepe the Frog without being punched in the face?
Are you like the hipster version of the neo-Nazi movement?
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
No? Well, you're just lying then.
If you're still watching, I assume you didn't come here to have your mind changed, but instead are a true comic book fan who knows your history.
Oh, that's one hell of a smug claim. If you disagree with me, you're not a true comic book fan. If you disagree with me, you know jack shit about history. And I love that you're being honest, that your goal isn't to change the minds of the people, but just to keep on perpetuating the lies. You're basically saying that your video has absolutely no point. Okay, can't argue with that. So that's the end of the video, and still not one example from some cringy Marvel writing because that one will obviously destroy your arguments in an instant and people would not take one side towards you. You made a video on a goal to not convince people who are already on this side. Well, props to you for being honest about it. Since you have no arguments left, you can just go and resort to punching people you disagree with now. See you on prison! Before we end this video, good lord, we have too many people here. Matthew Hendren, Riz Walker, and Oshiri Studios. Thanks for the pledges on Patreon, guys. You guys are wonderful. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead, click the like button, and subscribe for more. If you wish, you could support me on Patreon. And thanks for watching.